As airline traffic resumes and passenger numbers increase after the lockdowns of the COVID-19 pandemic, the continent is set to welcome a Pan-African partnership that is ready to take to the skies. Kenyan Airways and South African Airways have announced plans to begin a search for an investor for the Pan-African airline group they aim to create next year. Kenyan Airways CEO Alan Kilavuka said that the Kenyan and South African governments intend to buy a minority interest in the Pan-African carrier. He further claims that the focus is on obtaining funding from a financial institution rather than an industry partner, such as a Gulf carrier, since this may jeopardize plans to divide long-haul flights between the airline's hubs. According to one scenario, SAA's Johannesburg base would serve as a hub for Southern Hemisphere activities such as flights to Sydney, while Asian operations would be handled by Nairobi. The hubs would be able to keep some rival flights running, and cities like London would benefit from both. The two carriers are also seeking to recruit a third member from West Africa, most likely in Nigeria, Ghana, the Ivory Coast, or Senegal. Once Africa's second largest airline after Ethiopian Airlines, SAA has suffered and managed somehow to survive for decades on government bailouts and was shedding routes even before the COVID-19 pandemic struck. And Kenyan Airways has fared only marginally better in recent times. On the show today, the focus is on the partnership between South African Airways and Kenyan Airways as they look to hit the runway with their Pan-African airline group. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. Joining me today is Toni Ukachukwu. He's the CEO of Aviators Africa and an aviation consultant. Toni, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
So it does seem like there are plans to have this partnership, this Pan-African airline, but there's some conflicting statements. So let's quickly take a look at that. Now, just on Friday, South Africa's Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, said that there were exploratory talks between SAA and Kenyan Airways about the potential of launching a new continental airline. Exploratory was the word he used. So what do we know right now definitively? It's been 7 months since really the first statement about a Pan-African airline group came out. What is it really now?
Thank you very much. So from when the partnership talk started a few months ago, it was how the two carriers can partner, look for ways to partner, not really forming a Pan-African airline, okay? But there were conflicting reports about how can two loss-making airlines come upon a Pan-African airline. But the truth is, now that we heard the word exploratory, that means they are looking for ways or seeking for ways to see how they can come up with a Pan-African airline. But I don't think we should jump the gun. We don't know what the frameworks are until they come up with a framework or how they haven't explored or how they want to form a Pan-African airline. Then, as stakeholders, who can dig in and now see the possibilities of it being a success.
So even though we don't have much of a framework, let's go on some of the things we do know. But you mentioned something that's very critical to this conversation, two loss-making airlines. So let's look at that. Kenyan Airways, in its report for the year ended December, said that it did not make any payments for loans that were taken in two tranches last year and in 2020. It has now defaulted on interest for a 25 billion shilling loan that's owed to the government. It was in January of this year that the South African government concluded and signed a sales and purchase agreement for the sale of 51% of SAA with its preferred strategic equity partner. And even after bailouts of around $500 million, around 426 million euros, restructuring its debt as well, the airline only came out from bankruptcy after it slashed hundreds of jobs. Are these really the two airlines that need to come together to propose a possibility of a Pan-African airline group?
For me personally, the intention is good to see how to form, have some partnership by African carriers. For me, the intention is good. However, if you also talk about the partnership, some people are saying they should sort out their loss-making entity before they come into partnership. But I will have a different position on that. you can't go into a marriage with a profit-making and a loss-making airline. They are not on the same platform. No profit-making airline will go into partnership with a loss-making airline. For me, this marriage, they are on the same platform. They are both loss-making. So if they can they can work out ways that both loss-making can turn around and be profit-making, then it makes more sense. Because if a loss-making airline is seeking to go into partnership, no profit-making airline will go into such a partnership. So I think loss-loss can equal to a win if they work out their frameworks very well. There is a possibility to turn the tides around.
Okay. So let's look at some of the activities both of them have been involved in recent times. We know that last year, Kenya pulled out of an existing alliance and almost became nationalized in the process. And that's been a bit of back and forth as to what Kenya really is, a national carrier or just an independent one. But what would make this new partnership any different? What concerns do you have beyond the fact that these are two loss-making airlines? What concerns would you have, especially with the potential for government interference? We've seen Kenya being bailed out by the Kenyan government. We've seen SAA being bailed out for almost 20-something years now by the South African government. What concerns would you have about a potential government interference in this kind of strategic partnership?
Okay, first of all, I would like to say that if you recall, Kenyan Airways was already in a joint venture with Air France KLM, which was suspended in 2020, and then both airlines decided to just end the marriage, if you will, in 1st September 2021. For that partnership, it was not a win-win. Kenyan Airways, it was not favorable for Kenyan Airways, and they decided to opt out, which I'm in support of, because you can't go in a marriage where it does not profit you, and they had to come out of it. So coming into the nationalization for Kenyan Airways, I think that because of the resilience these carriers have had and have a long history, I think Africans should have faith in these airlines and look for ways to turn them around. I mean, it's better for us to look for ways to make these airlines sustainable than getting SAA or Kenyan Airways out of the skies. It does not benefit Africa in any way. So for me, there should be less government interference to help these airlines thrive. So the more government just provides an enabling environment and gives it the support it needs, I think Kenyan Airways and SAA can come back.
Okay. We seem to hear a little bit more positivity and a little bit more developments from the Kenya Airways side, with the CEO, Alan Kilavuka, saying that the governments of both Kenya and South Africa plan to take a minority stake in the Pan-African global airline group. What does that look like to you, a minority stake? What do you think that would turn out to be?
So for me, that is still sketchy at this point, and I cannot really make any comments on that because it's not quite clear what this Pan-African airline is, talk less of taking a minority stake. So in the coming days, we are going to see more as this begins to unfold, bearing in mind that they are still at the exploratory stage, if you will. So let's wait for coming days to see how this Pan-African airline plans are coming on board, and we can make further comments on them.
Okay. So following up with that, one thing they seem to be exploring is the potential of a financial institution investor over, like an additional partner, over choosing a Gulf carrier. Is there a compromise to be found there? Would you think one is better? Is it about competition and still having access to certain routes?
I mean, I think it's better with investment, in cash rather than, carriers, because, again, go back to the JV that Kenyan Airways had with Air France KLM. It wasn't beneficial to Air France. Kenyan Airways. They want to go back into that kind of partnership again. So it's better to get an investor that can provide funds, and then they can look at ways to inject the funds to help their profitability. Because again, when it comes to carriers, in having partnership with foreign carriers, there's this question of Africa is already at receiving end. Foreign carriers have close to 80% of our traffic, so they don't want to have some kind of aircraft capacity dumpage or in that area. So it's better to have cash so they can clearly know what they want to use their cash for, rather than having a partnership with a carrier that it will not be a win-win, if you will.
Okay. So win-wins are what we're looking at, but we have to also ask ourselves the question, does Africa actually need a Pan-African airline group? And that's the question I want you to think about right now, Toni, as we go on a break. We'll pick up the conversation for there. If it's not Kenya Airways, if it's not South African Airways, is there still a need for a Pan-African airline group on the continent? You'll get an answer from my guest right after this. And still with me is Toni Ukachukwu, CEO of Aviators Africa and aviation consultant, as we look at the proposed plan for a Pan-African airline group led by Kenya Airways and South African Airways. Now, away from these two airlines for a moment, Toni, does Africa even really need a Pan-African airline group? If we're saying that these are two loss-making airlines, maybe they're not in the best position to help this Pan-African group get off the ground. Is there even a need for one? Who would be in a better position maybe to take this airline, this Pan-African airline dream and make it happen once again? So Toni, can you get an answer for me there?
Yes, I think Africa needs a Pan-African airline. It's long overdue. Now, who are those coming to form that Pan-African airline? Now, it begs the question, do you want it to be Kenya Airways, South African Airways, or other airlines is the big question. But whether there is need to have a Pan-African airline, I think strategically, Africa needs one.
What would be the benefits to the continent of this airline, or this grouping, or this partnership as it may be?
So the benefit really, you understand that interconnectivity in Africa is still an issue. With foreign carriers dominating the continent, we don't have strong African carriers except for Ethiopia. I mean, with a continent as big as ours, we should have more airlines that can compete or should be able to compete with these foreign carriers. And so far, it's just only Ethiopia that's a shining example. So if Kenya Airways and South African Airways are trying to come together to push that kind of agenda, I think it's a welcome idea. But if not both of them, it's an idea that its time has come. Africa needs to have strategically a Pan-African airline that can compete with other foreign carriers.
Okay, so the two collaborating carriers say they're seeking a third. Of course, the East is taken care of, the southern part of the continent is taken care of, leaving for now the West, and that's definitely a hub you can't ignore. So they're looking either at Nigeria, Ghana, the Ivory Coast, or Senegal. So we know that Nigeria and Ghana are both working on revamping or revitalizing some form of reformation of their national carriers, while both Senegal and the Ivory Coast already have national carriers that are still operating. Should the partnership be looking for only national carriers or be open to airlines that are based in the West African sub-region to partner with these other two?
So I think potentially they will be looking at an already existing carrier that has capacity, at that level to be able to add to them as a West African carrier. But if you also look at the private sector of Nigeria, for example, we have some private carriers that have that capacity to be potentially a West African partner. But again, they've not narrowed their search yet. So whether it be from Senegal, which has a national carrier, or Ivory Coast, but the Cote d'Ivoire, or even Nigeria, that have private sector-driven airlines, there are airlines that can potentially be able to, be their West African partner. So we are not at loss to getting a partner in West Africa. It's just which one are they going for, whether it be a national carrier from the private sector, or how is the framework going to be, and for them pushing forward.
All right, so my final question is in two parts, because it's almost like we have to look at two scenarios for this. We know international airlines are here, and more of them are coming, as well as we expect to see passenger numbers increase beyond the COVID scenario. Even as it is for February 2022, African Airlines capacity grew by 34.7%. So on the road to recovery, as it may be. And competition for these airlines is coming from more developed ecosystems, from partnerships that they can replicate here on the continent. So the first part is, if this is a Pan-African airline group led by Kenya Airways and South African Airways, how successful do you think it could be? Could it survive the competition that's ahead? And if we say we're having a Pan-African airline group led by somebody like Ethiopian Airlines, and they're able to bring the wealth of experience and the success that they've had on the continent as well, how successful do you think that kind of partnership would be led by Ethiopian Airlines and also survive the competition that's coming?
Okay, so the question is kind of hydra-headed in the sense that if Kenyan Airways and South African Airways come up with a partnership, I think they'll be, if they come out from their loss-making, scenario, I'm sure they will be very competitive with other carriers. Again, from the Ethiopian side, they of course they have already track history of their success story. That's another shining example that will be very competitive. So the issue is, at the end of the day, if you look at single African air travel market and African Continental Trade Agreement on the African continent, if there can be a partnership that can make these airlines to scale and have a good intra-African connectivity, I think they will be very competitive.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. Unfortunately, there's not more to work with this conversation, but as you've said, there is the need for a Pan-African airline group that serves the continent, but we need to see more of the framework and the details that's coming from this. Toni Ukachukwu, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. And we look forward to hearing more about the details that will come from this possible Pan-African group. 7 months ago, that's when it was muted and the words started making their way into the press. And up to now, just a little bit of information. What we're hearing from South Africa is not as enthusiastic as what we're hearing from Kenya in regards to what could be with this Pan-African airline group and also the potential for a West African partner. Who could it be on this side of the continent? You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, we'll tell you a few stories that we're keeping our eyes on. And now these are the stories we want you to watch out for. Just as we watch out for them as well, we start in the southern part of the continent where the South African Revenue Service has paid out refunds to the tune of around 321 billion rand in the previous tax year, the highest ever in the 25 years of the tax authority. This represents more than 5% of the gross domestic product. VAT, which is value-added tax compliance, remains a key focus area for SARS, mainly because this tax type dominates the refunds. VAT received the biggest portion of refunds, around 262 billion rand in the tax year. And staying in South Africa, the rand went flat in early trade on Monday, struggling to make gains against a broadly stronger dollar ahead of local manufacturing data due later in the day. This morning, the rand traded at around 14.66 against the dollar, largely unchanged from its previous close on Friday. The U.S. dollar remains supported as the Federal Reserve readies to move interest rates sharply higher. The East African Tea Trade Association has launched a $2.12 million digital trading platform at the Mombasa Tea Auction. The platform was funded by the Danish International Development Agency and dubbed the Integrated Tea Trading System. It will end physical interaction of tea traders at the auction house and increase the profits of farmers and dealers by cutting operating costs. And finally, crude oil prices slipped in early Asian trading following the second straight weekly decline after world consumers announced plans to release crude from strategic stocks and as Chinese lockdowns continued. Brent crude fell 38 cents to $102.40 a barrel, while U.S. crude lost 16 cents to $98.18. And that's the Business Edge we have for you today. Don't forget to follow us on social media, download our mobile app, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, watch us on the platforms we are available. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. Until next time, you have a pleasant day.